Wait, what I was going to say about this video is you'll be able to see the title so that you can further research them yourself. I'm just going to try to hit on some key points. As you've already seen, I have the inability to fast forward or rewind unless it's like massive. So I'm going to do my best to capture these. What I can't capture, I'll recite.
Everyone loves the idea of parallel universes. Maybe it's the appeal of an ideal world where you have second chances and things turn out differently. An alternate reality where you do get into Hogwarts and the Star Wars prequels aren't made and you finally plug in your asymmetric computer cord correctly on the first try. But is there really a place in science for such wistful speculation? I mean, if the universe is everything that there is, you can't have two versions of it, right? Otherwise, the pair would really be everything, and what you started off calling the universe wasn't. The problem here is terminology. Physicists speaking informally often say universe when they really mean observable universe. That is, the part of the whole universe that we've so far been able to see. And it's perfectly fine to talk about multiple different observable universes. For example, an alien near the edge of our observable universe will see parts of the whole universe that we can't yet see because the light hasn't had time to reach us yet. But that's a well-understood question and not what physicists normally talk about when they discuss multiple observable and largely unrelated proposed physical models for the universe, none of which has been tested or confirmed by experiment, by the way. The three multiverse models are Type 1, bubble universes or baby black hole universes. This is the most straightforward kind of multiverse. The basic idea is that perhaps there are other parts of the universe which are so far away that we will never see them, or are inside black holes, so similarly we will never see them. This kind of model was created as an attempt...
Okay, so I'm trying to decide whether or not I should go ahead. Universes that are far away, that you can't see them, and universes that are inside of black holes that you can't see. So that's one that resides underground and another that resides above ground. Does that make sense? So the ones that they're considering as being far away, you can't see them because they're above ground. And the ones that are in black holes, they're saying that you can't see because they're below ground. Portals are used to get to both.
To explain why our universe is so good at making stars and galaxies and black holes and life. As the argument goes, if each of these...
And for those of you that don't know, there's no reason for there to ever be a black hole. Whenever there's a black hole, that means that there are scientists, Satanists, that have created those black holes to hide.
Separate mutually unseeable bubbles in the universe had slightly different laws of physics than...
Real quick, 3.14, that's pi. That's considered the layer of Earth that we live in right now, 3.2. You can imagine that's another life form. And that doesn't mean that 430, I suppose that is, E and pi 2, is not, does not have life form. It just means that I don't know enough about it to elaborate on that.
Bubbles in the universe had slightly different laws of physics, then by definition we could only exist
It's like that
in one
Naki
that had the
spiral.
right physical laws to allow us to exist. Like, we have to live in a universe where the Earth could form, because if the Earth couldn't form, then we couldn't be here. If you're not convinced by this logic, don't worry too much. There's not yet any experimental evidence for this kind of multiverse. Multiverse Type 2. Membranes and extra dimensions. Inspired in part by the inability of the mathematics of string theory to predict the right number of dimensions for the universe we think of as our universe is actually just a three-dimensional surface embedded within a larger super-universe with 9 spatial dimensions. Kind of like how each page of a newspaper is its own two-dimensional surface embedded within our three-dimensional world. And of course, if space had 9 dimensions rather than 3, there'd be plenty of space for other three-dimensional surfaces that appeared like ours to be universes in their own right, but, like the pages of a newspaper, were actually part of a bigger whole. These kinds
Okay, so I imagine by the time that you see this part of the video that you'd already know what I had to say about parallel reality. So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you some insight of what's taking place. It's the 18th of October, which is a Sunday, and I've had about 6 to 7 ounces of liquor. They've removed the liquor from my stomach and put it in the neighbors that they're posing as, and they're acting as if they're satisfying two sides. So they're attacking me right now so that I can't speak freely during this video, and have also removed the liquor to heighten their high. So the complaint was that they can't, like when I drink liquor, that it heightens their urge to do drugs, and that they feel that that's a form of sabotage. So they'll remove it from my system and act as if I haven't had anything to drink. And this was just an hour ago. And you can see it's 10:29 right now. This was just an hour ago. And then they'll, so they're like lying to what's the word? To impose favor.
Multiverse Type 3. The many worlds picture of quantum mechanics.
Oh no!
Physicists still don't...
Okay, so I was expecting this video to pick up where it left off, but it didn't. They were talking about membranes. I'm going to have to try to rewind a little bit.
Multiverse Type... Multiverse Type 3. Think of as our universe is actually just a three-dimensional surface embedded within a larger super-universe with 9 spatial dimensions. Kind of like how each page of a newspaper is its own two-dimensional surface embedded within our three-dimensional world. And of course, if space had 9 dimensions rather than 3, there'd be plenty of space for other three-dimensional surfaces that appeared like ours to be universes in their own right, but, like the pages of a newspaper, were actually part of a bigger whole. These kinds of surfaces are called membranes, or brains for short. And as a reminder, there is not yet any...
Okay, that tidbit of information that they just reference called membranes, that's actually how they're faking balance. That's why my bloodline is called the original Eve gene, and because there's many spin-offs of it, and they are acknowledging how they're able to corrupt the code.
Multiverse Type 3, the many worlds picture of quantum mechanics. Surprisingly, physicists still don't fully understand how the collapse of the wave function in quantum mechanics happens, and the many worlds hypothesis makes an attempt at explanation by proposing that every possible alternate timeline for the universe is real, and they all happen in an ever larger, ever-branching way. Like a universal choose-your-own-adventure where every possible story happens. If this were the case, we might not...
Okay, so once the code has been manipulated and they're pretending that someone's you that's not you, or pretending someone that's me that's not me, they have all these different scenarios that they can play out, and most of them are just trying to obtain a part of my past experiences, not anything. Pausing because they're playing music outside my window. This is also factored into future events. So, by now that the government is able to look into the future, and it's a matter of decoding the mind and
multiverse model by proposing maybe anything that... Multiverse model by... Multiverse Type 3, the many worlds picture of quantum mechanics. Surprisingly, physicists still don't fully understand how the collapse of the wave function in quantum mechanics happens, and the many worlds hypothesis makes an attempt at explanation by proposing that every possible alternate...
Hold on. I want you to understand that everything that they're claiming they do not understand, they overstand.
Timeline for the universe is real, and they all happen in an ever larger, ever-branching way. Like a universal choose-your-own-adventure where every possible story happens. If this were the case, we might not realize it because we'd be stuck living out just one of the infinitely many possible lives available to us. And in some ways, many worlds is similar to the bubble multiverse model by proposing maybe anything that does. We just happen to exist in a series of happenings that were necessary for us to exist. If you're still not convinced by this logic, don't worry. There's not yet any experimental evidence for this kind of multiverse. Of course, if you want to get imaginative, you could also combine several of these models together into a multi-multiverse, a new super speculative model based these multiverse hypotheses. For example, if our observable universe were really just one of many disconnected bubbles or membranes, and if it happened to collide with another bubble or membrane sometime in the past, then that collision would certainly have had some sort of effect on what we see when we look up at the night sky. On the other hand, the many worlds interpretation might be missed fairly soon, since experimentalists are becoming increasingly able to manipulate and control ever larger quantum mechanical labs, systems that approach the line between the quantum realm and our everyday experience. So as always, we must remember that physics is science, not philosophy, and in our attempts to explain the universe that we observe, we have to make claims that can in
There's a reason the two are separate.
principle be tested, and then test them.
I think I'm gonna
Beyond it is another dimension. Evidence of a parallel universe was put forth back in 2015. Now scientists believe they have uncovered evidence of not only a neighboring parallel universe, but one in which time runs backwards. According to the New York Post, scientists conducting cosmic ray detection experiments in Antarctica have uncovered what they believe is evidence of a parallel universe where the laws of physics differ from our own. They reportedly detected
I was gonna skip
high-energy
this,
particles
but you
out of Antarctica, which is contrary to how these particles
You need
are
to
supposed to
see it.
behave. They're supposedly
They're
only
so
able to be
fucking
detected
stupid.
when they come down from space. So to detect them going up instead of down could imply that the particles were traveling backwards in time. That's the theory, at least. The New Scientist breaks down the possible discovery like this. That strange finding was made in 2016. Since then, all sorts of suggestions rooted in known physics have been put forward to account for the perplexing signal, and all have been ruled out. What's left is shocking in its implications. Explaining the signal requires the existence of a topsy-turvy universe created in the same Big Bang as our own and existing in parallel with it. In this mirror world, positive is negative, left is right, and time runs backwards. IGN can confirm the existence of this parallel, backwards universe. In fact, we have a satellite office there. We go now to No Meat.
Do you see how fucking stupid they are? Like, this is a mockery. That's satanic as fuck.
Cool. For all the news in the universe says, stay tuned, IGN. And you can customize and save with Liberty Mutual. What if there are other universes just like ours, with an infinite number of Earths, with uncountable versions?
I guess I'll let this play. This is kind of my theory. I'll go into it
What
later.
if there are other universes just like ours, with an infinite number of Earths, with uncountable versions? And what if we don't have to look too far to find them? Maybe a mirror version of our reality is right here. This is What If. And here's what would happen if we could open a portal to a parallel universe.
Notice he said if they do open portals.
Our universe began when a small but very hot singularity exploded in the Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago. But maybe it wasn't the only one to be born then. In physics, space and time fuse into one four-dimensional continuum, space-time. If this space-time is flat and stretches far beyond the limits of our observation, there is a possibility that it holds uncountable, disconnected universes. But for all we know, there are a limited number of ways the particles in those other...
Notice I agree to this Earth stretching unlimitable, but disagree to there being a series of multiverses.
universes can be put together.
Simply because it's a matter of DNA and bloodline. You have to keep in mind that everyone that is practicing and examining and distributing anything that in relation to science, the universe, society in general has a corrupt code. They are not any of Earth's primary occupants, so to speak. These are all created races.
At some point, the realities will have to start repeating themselves. That means, in theory, our reality is only a small part of what's out there. And someone just like you might be living in a parallel universe similar to our own.
Okay, so notice how they show him in 3 different places. This is very similar to the picture that I showed you already. It's suggesting that you're one place when you're not. Suggesting that you're doing something that you're not. And it's all based upon your past. So, sometimes there's people that want to obtain your past experiences, So if eating out is a lifestyle that you had, that's something that they might want to obtain. If living at your own leisure is something that you've experienced, that's something that they might want to obtain. If having folks in favor of you, just being attracted to you and wanting to spark up a conversation with you is something that you've experienced, that's something that they might want to experience. I'm going to write more about it, because I can't, they're not allowing me to speak freely now. But that could be, you can imagine that's anything, if you're in a domestic situation, ideally you don't want your husband or your boyfriend or your girlfriend to beat on you anymore. If you're in a situation where, your kids don't respect you, you don't want that issue anymore. This is all a way that they are escaping who they are by applying your experiences to them. It's kind of like a subconscious filter.
And that universe may be as close as 1,000,000 trillion trillionth of a centimeter away. Although the wall between the universes might be incredibly small, traveling between them won't be easy, but it could be done. All you need is an 85 megawatt nuclear reactor capable of firing billions of neutrons on command. That's how a team of physicists working in Tennessee's Oak Ridge Laboratory are trying to open the gates of a mirror universe. Of course, they have to find it first. It all comes from a theory that says, if you beam neutrons at a wall, none should pass through. If some do manage to make it to the other side, it would mean that they've transformed into mirror images of themselves as they went through the wall between the two worlds. How do we even know all that?
Okay, so it's much worse than what they're depicting. You can imagine that using phenomena like magic, for example, it doesn't take that to apply it. It would be saying that you needed a tool like that to create the same type of experience. There's always something that they have visible. There's always something that they have visible that they'll release to the public saying that
Who managed to make it to the other side?
They cut me off, the video timed out. So I'm just going to allow this to continue playing. Anything that I have to say regarding it, I will note in the rest of this video. And I hope that you're able to recall what you saw prior and be able to see how these two things relate or conflict. That's part of perception management, mind control. Is keep removing the part so that you can't see the whole.
That they've transformed into mirror images of themselves as they went through the wall between the two worlds. How do we even know all that? Well, there's one odd thing about neutrons. In particle beams, on average, they last for 14 minutes and 48 seconds before they decay into protons. But if you place neutrons in a lab bottle, they'll break down 10 seconds faster. It's not something we can explain with physics yet. Neutrons are all the same, and there shouldn't be any 10-second difference in their lifespan, regardless of where they're stored. Could it be possible that the neutron experiments didn't go as expected because physicists accidentally opened a portal to a mirror world? That would be the first evidence that a mirror universe exists right next to our own. A mirror world with mirror atoms. Maybe even a mirror Earth. An entire mirror world, almost totally cut off from ours. Could you meet another version of yourself in that mirror world? Now, it gets a little complicated.
That's a human cloning reference for non-human beings.
Even though particle configurations can repeat themselves, the odds of finding a portal to a parallel universe that's exactly the same as ours?
So if you haven't figured that part out by now, and I've referenced it in the past, like when it comes to human cloning, they have a place with nothing but my bloodline. And they're using those clones to create you.
Are close to zero. Think about it. There are a novum vigintillion particles in the universe. That's the number 1, followed by 90 zeros. Every single one of them would need to have had the same interactions for 13.7 billion years to create an identical universe to what we have now. The mirror universe would most likely have its own mirror laws of physics, but it's hard to know for sure because nobody has detected a single mirror particle yet. Maybe we shouldn't be searching for answers in a lab. Perhaps we should be looking in space itself. Our universe is full of dark matter. We can't observe it directly, and we have no idea what it's made of or
That dark matter attaches itself to you.
how it works, but we know that dark matter is strong enough to stop galaxies from flying apart. Yet, we can't find it. Perhaps the reason is that dark matter...
And when they say that dark matter keeps galaxies from flying apart, that means that the gravity that's associated with it weighs us down and makes us heavy. It keeps us from flying. My bloodline. Those that are able. This is not, I told you before, we are not an expression of eugenics. We are hindered by eugenics.
is leaking from the mirror world into ours. If we could detect that, it would confirm that a mirror universe exists. Because we know that there's 5 times more dark matter
And the mockery of that is Marvel characters.
than there is visible matter in the universe, you've got to think that a mirror universe is much more massive than the one we live in. Even if we did manage to open up a gate into another world, the portal would be incredibly small. Too small for you to see anything without some very powerful lab equipment. We'd still be dealing with neutrons and protons, remember? You could only enter that realm if you had the ability to shrink yourself to the size of an atom. But that's a story for another What If.
Hello, this is Boyd from Airboyd, and we are still at CES this week. We are covering the Delta Airlines event, and specifically this morning I'm taking a look at the parallel reality experience that was briefed in yesterday's keynote. Delta CEO Ed Bastian highlighted the experience in the keynote in the morning, and they had a small video to go with it, and then this mock-up in their booth in the CES floor is in fact a fully working model. What they did was they gave us tickets. We got to choose where we were going from and to. In my case, I chose Tokyo, and it was also going to have my language being Japanese for the arrival, and obviously for the channel name. So the first room was basically a demonstration of how the technology worked. I always stood in front of a statue of the Eiffel Tower, and from where I was standing, I could see Paris. We were then invited to swap with our 3 other partners, 4 total people in the room, so that we could see what each other person was seeing based on their position in the room. And as of yet, we still have not scanned in our personal tickets, so we're just seeing a demonstration of how the technology works in this room. As I move over to the left, I go to Tokyo, continue on over to Mexico, and then I'm able to go back across to the other side and see the other cities.
Okay, this is what's being done with the neighbors on a small scale and with businesses and corporations on a much larger scale to me. So they're always suggesting that I'm somewhere that I'm not. And this gives you an idea of how they're able to manipulate reality. Although they're all in the same room, which means they all have the same geographical location right now as far as longitude and latitude with maybe not even a click off. There shouldn't even be a full click in variation. They're able to, depending on where you are, see something different. So when they're reporting to stakeholders and things of that nature, they're always suggesting that I'm somewhere they're not, and they make the neighborhood look like a completely different place. And sometimes it has me in the area, and sometimes it has me nowhere near the area. So that thing that I was talking about with membranes in the past, the thin layer, they're able to manipulate the code and corrupt the code. They're always claiming that I'm them and they're me. And they send them out in a vibrational frequency that they did not otherwise have. So they're mad because they are possessed, and I am telling these things about them and the changes that I've noticed take place around me and how I see the taunts that are being made remotely by the agencies playing out in reality. So there was one more thing. I want to show you something. You have to keep in mind who these things are, who these scientists are, who the elite are, who scientific scholars are. These are demons. It's allegory. One thing posing other another.
System works. There's 4 total people in the room so that we can see what each other person was seeing based on their position in the room. And as of yet, we still have not scanned in our personal tickets, so we're just seeing a demonstration of how the technology works in this room. As I move over to the left, I go to Tokyo, continue on over to Mexico, and then I'm able to go back across to the other side and see the other cities. We were then invited to walk to the front of the room and take a look at how the positional system works, or at least visually depicted. What they had was a set of mirrors up in the back of the room, and the mirrors depict essentially the positions of what 12 people would be standing around, and what their each individual view of the screen that they're looking at would look like. And as you can see, that the countries are represented along with the statues that would be standing behind. And then the video shows that each of the pictures can have something moving, static, or anything else like that. As they explained to us, this is the first time it's been deployed outside the lab and shown to people. And this is really just a reference of what it would look like to have 12 people standing looking at the same screen, and how in each of their positions they're seeing something completely different. From there, we passed on into the next room, and the next room is where we're basically scanning in our boarding pass and continuing on our journey as we would in the airport. As we scan in our tickets, we look at the sign, and each of us is seeing a personalized sign just for us based on position. When we scanned in our ticket, the cameras and sensors in the room picked up where we are and began to follow us through the room. Now, the purpose of these screens is to be used for boarding, deplaning, and a number of other things. So, in this example, when I land in Tokyo, it says "Welcome to Tokyo" specifically to me, has a choice of languages and tells me where I'm going to get my personal bags. As I walk across the room here, I go and stand behind another person who identified himself as Chris for the purpose, and you can see that his name changes to Chris when I get within about 1 to 3 degrees of where he's standing. And then I move back off to the left again, and again, it's personalized just for me based on where I am in the room. Delta says this is scalable to hundreds of people, and apparently it only requires a few degrees on per person for this technology to work. And they're going to deploy it this summer.
So that thing that I was saying before in some of my older videos, and a lot of them have not even hit the internet, especially from 2019, about people trying to align themselves with me to obtain a vibrational frequency that they cannot obtain. So they would try and get near or try and get close or flood a store to walk off feeling like I was feeling, and kind of, it's like an energy transference in a way, because they found that I'm able to operate under the worst circumstances.
In Detroit and start rolling it out throughout. Here's another view of the language selection for my flight. Because I was going to Tokyo, it offered me Japanese. I could have had a number of other languages as well. Again, this will display just for me and in the location that I'm.
And it wasn't just that, it was also that they cannot stand for someone who does not have anyone doing anything for them. So part of them appearing where I appear, like flooding the library, is to suggest that they're doing something for me. Either they gave me a ride there or they didn't, or they saw me and had a conversation or an encounter with me and they did not.
Standing in and will follow me throughout the airport. Quite amazing technology for those who remember the Minority Report ads that are customized for people. This is the same sort of science fiction that we're looking at seeing, but it's literally going to be deployed this summer in the Detroit airport. And eventually Delta hopes to have this rolled out pretty much everywhere in the system. A lot of the stuff they showed off at CES, they hope to have in airports and aircraft in the next 5 years. So a lot of amazing stuff coming out of CES this year.
Hey guys, it's Jemima and welcome to my channel. So today guys, I want to share with you how to manifest through parallel realities. Now some of you are like, yeah, that's super cool, and others are like,
In case you didn't hear what I said before I hit play again, I said now some of the more wicked stuff. So, there's different tiers of this entire parallel reality scheme, but the intent is to normalize it. What you've seen with Delta is them trying to normalize the phenomenon. And then what you see on this lower scale with these, what appear to be everyday people, but they're actually aliens. This is a constituent and it's an identity being used by an agent. And, so what you see on this smaller scale is them trying to coach people into this falsehood.
what is this she got about? She's actually crazy. But let me just explain a little background and kind of how this all. So if you haven't already heard of the theory, quantum mechanics, or physics, well, anyway, they did this experiment called the slit experiment. It was basically when they were working with electrons and particles. So they had two slits. So when the camera was observing the electrons, they acted as particles. However, when no equipment was used to observe the electrons, it acted as waves and particles simultaneously. So if you're still like, I have no idea what that means, I'm going to link a documentary. It goes for like an hour. It's so interesting. It just kind of tells you everything you need to know, because there is so much information you kind of need to process, and it really helped me kind of get a bit more knowledge about all of this stuff. So go check that out. Now, the word parallel implies that, there are different realities occurring and existing at the same time or in a similar way. And a lot of people believe that event A happens after event B and so on. But I believe that we're constantly jumping through one timeline to the next throughout the day, and the vibration at which you resonate is the reality that occurs. So, but do know every decision you make plays out in infinite ways. Each you believes that it is the real you, and that all the others are just different possibilities. And this really makes no difference, as your soul is aware of the infinite realities that are occurring right now. Okay, so first, need you to know that nothing exists in the past, nothing exists in the future. The only thing that exists right now is the present moment. So,
Okay, and something else that you'll also, I think I'm going to put both videos up. There's also a 29 video. The thing about this is I was kind of vulgar while watching through these, as I was attempting to capture, some stuff to use. So I didn't really want to have to use that video, but I think I'm going to attach it anyhow, just so I don't have to repeat myself. But I annotate throughout, how these movements, like when they started and the common things that they say. So be sure to watch, even if you skip to just this part when they're talking about these things that appear to be regular, everyday, normal people. But they denounce their past.
So right now, I could be drinking my cup of coffee, or I could leave my cup of coffee there and let it go cold and not drink it all, just forget about it. Or the third possibility is I could go drink this coffee and I spill it over me and get serious degree burns and end up in a hospital. Okay, that's kind of crazy, but you know what I'm saying? There's different possibilities by just having that cup of coffee. So it's exactly the same, with manifesting and making things a reality. Everyone has this picture, this dream of their best version of themselves. The dream, say, they want to be a Hollywood actor or actresses, or, you want to be a vet, or, you just want it, whatever it is. That person exists, but in another parallel reality. And there's also a version of you that exists as poor and stuff like that. But as you're sitting here right now, because you made a conscious decision and you took certain paths and you got to where you are now, and those kids over in Cambodia and stuff, they dream of having an education, just having a normal everyday life like us, which we, let's be honest, complain about. And if they can, get an education, move over to a country, a different country.
This is a really bad example, by the way.
Amazing. It is beautiful. So they can do that and get out of that reality and make.
Okay, this is a really bad example. I'm not going to even have you suffer through the rest of this. But I'm pretty sure at some point she said something that hit on the key topic. It made a point at some point. There was an entire reason that I recorded it. I just don't know that we're going to make it to see it. So I'm going to skip to the next.
Looking at moving and vibrating energy. So for me, the multiple dimensional realities of this one reality we're living, it looks like it blends together, essentially. It's not, the third dimension is not as solid for me as it is for most people.
No, I really love that perspective, and it's such an important awareness if we're going to get out of the density of material, sort of a dead end that we've taken because we think this is the only level of reality that exists, the mainstream. So in order to at least present another perspective, we need this awareness. But how were you able to come in so, maybe there's no answer for how, but what was it about you that came in so conscious of this?
It's just an intention. See, a lot of people would like to believe that I achieved some, supreme level of being before doing this, but the reality is that my perspective is no more valuable than the perspective of somebody who is, so to speak, stuck in a physical perspective. Because all perspectives are infinitely valuable to the universal consciousness. So what it was that I came in with the intention of being this way, with the intention of not forgetting the multidimensional energetic nature of this universe, because of both the expansion that would cause me and because of universal asking. So the universal asking of most beings, even especially in the 60s, which were the parents which brought me in, was that there was a desire for humankind to know itself, a desire for humankind to touch its true essence. And so quite often that's realized through the next generation, which is why you see this giant boom of indigo children, this boom of in-touch individuals, many of whom have what mainstream science would call autistic spectrum disorders, but in reality it is a group of energy-conscious beings who cannot fit into society because they cannot shut off their multidimensional faculties.
Right, so you came in with an awareness of these multidimensional aspects, in a sense, on behalf of the universe or consciousness itself, I would think. And so what are you aware of? Because I feel like your awareness and things perhaps that you haven't even told your audience are valuable shifting who we think we were and are moving into. So I'm curious of your, really out there perspectives in some ways. If you don't mind.
I don't know what they are. This is sort of the issue. When you're in the perspective, it's kind of difficult to see how it differs from other people's perspectives.
Well, just to see the bedpost as not a solid object and to know that it's a shifting vibration. I'm sure you're aware of other things that maybe you think are common to most people, but when you look at them and see their belief systems, you realize, wow, they don't have that.
Well, I'm not restricted to my perspective. It gets very hazy, reality versus non-reality, of course, whatever that meaning is. It gets very hazy when you're able to remove your consciousness from your physical perspective. When you withdraw your consciousness,
I want to be clear. The non-reality is recognizing that they aren't human, and she's going to touch on that in a little bit. She's going to say that, she's going to allude to it. She'll say whatever, these things are, whatever they want to be. It doesn't even have to be human, that type of statement. But they don't want to acknowledge that they're not human, and they don't want to acknowledge that they're not able to have a perspective. They don't want to acknowledge that they're escaping congenital inheritance. They don't want to acknowledge that, by birthright, they're supposed to be handicapped because they cannot develop. They don't have pineal glands, like these are created races. So when faced with these things in an argument like mine, of course, there's no escaping it. But my argument is being isolated. So right now, this is what it's been. And the truth is, my argument didn't even start or begin to develop, until it didn't start until probably 2013, 14, and develop more in 2017, like right after the government attacked me. That literally planted me where I didn't have any choice but to research all these topics. What else? You know what? We'll talk about the rest after I get out of jail, because I'm sure that you have some questions like about me and my views personally on white people. And I've mentioned that in a video, but I don't know if I'm going to release it before or after.
They don't have that.
well, I'm not restricted to my perspective. It gets very hazy, reality versus non-reality, of course, whatever that meaning is. It gets very hazy when you're able to remove your consciousness from your physical perspective. When you withdraw your consciousness, you are now unlimited by space and time. You are able to travel to anywhere that your intention wants to go and to access that type of a reality with as much extreme real feeling as you would this third-dimensional reality. So
no, that's good. I'm getting what you're saying. So are you aware of the other levels, planes, timeline,
Yes.
platform, and what can you say to us right now in relationship to some of those other awarenesses? I mean, what's happening there?
oh my god.
Are you bowling or something? No, I'm kidding. But, no, what are you doing? What's happening on those other planes you're here in this timeline dimension, but there's other levels. I'm just curious what goes on there for you from your perspective.
It's different based on each dimension, and I could essentially write a novel on each one, probably multiple novels on each one of these realities, but let's just say... Are you doing a similar job in some of these other as a spiritual catalyst, or... Yes, in fact, my 10th dimensional aspect is the most active. So quite often what you'll notice when people go out of body is they have experiences where they run...
Speaking of dimensions, because I am the end, I want you to know that they keep me in the lowest possible dimension at all times. And it's been that way for about 2 years of this over 3.5 year fight. And the constant, I told you I'm attacked science on a daily basis. My energy. It's not the dogma as much as it is the scientific attacks on my DNA to lower my vibrations. They cannot stand that they can't believe that my joyful disposition still manages to surface. So they're trying to get me in a place. They were trying to get me to look like your worst case scenario. Like, in terms of a vibrational frequency, someone that's just like really low and withdrawn and can't articulate what they're experiencing and can't have a normal conversation. Well, the idea of normal.
To what they usually identify as angels or spirit guides that talk.
This is all as they were acting like others were me. So they were applying their dogma to me and acting like they were me so that they could receive favor and make small advancements in life. And like I told you, when it comes to businesses and corporations, there's always some type of contractual agreement affiliated with it.
They're the ones who meet them out of body and say, you have the option to go back into your body if you'd like to, right? You've all heard those experiences. My 10th dimensional aspect, a great many times, is doing that with people, so I'm the one they're actually meeting out of body. And I can do that simultaneously as I'm sitting here talking to you.
You have full consciousness.
Okay, so remember that blended state of consciousness that I was talking about? Teal Swan is the type of demon that I'm talking about. Someone with her type of identity would be an agent within a government agency, and she would be able to observe via surveillance what's taking place and be in the situation at the same time and act something out. So that's why I'm having these really, really odd experiences that I'm never able to catch on camera. Like they know exactly when I'm coming out. They know exactly when they're going to see me. They know exactly when I'm about to record, stuff like that. I can't capture those type of things.
You have an awareness of that.
Oh yeah, I have full consciousness, meaning that I can do both at once. It's just about where I'm switching my focus. It's like right now you could either look at the computer screen or you could look at the wall behind the computer screen. That is as easy as it is for me to switch my consciousness between having this conversation or completely focusing on the other relationships that I'm having on multiple dimensional realities.
Do you think there's a facility of our human brain that turns on in order to have those multidimensional awarenesses?
No, in fact, I think it's a portion of our brain that turns off in order to have those multidimensional experiences.
Okay, that's good. So do you call this plane, the Teal Swan plane, the third dimension?
Yes.
And so what else are you, where's the 10th dimension? What's happening, like, let's say, on the 4th or 5th, 6th dimension of reality?
Fourth dimension, I am observing myself. Fifth dimension, I'm actually interacting with my own thought forms. That means that as I live my physical third dimensional experience here, say we're having a conversation, the feeling of this conversation is translating to symbolic images, which are constructs of mine, and that takes place on a fifth dimensional level and up into the sixth dimensional level. And so the self that is there is interacting with those symbols.
And on the 7th level and 8th and 9th, what was it?
Oh man, it's super complicated to sum up. Okay.
Okay, we have as much time as you want. Because I think it's fascinating because you're actually really defining the parameters as you see it for these multidimensional realities. I'm very interested. So yeah.
Okay, once you get to the seventh dimensional reality, what's happening is
Let me explain something to you. When you are doing the devil's work, you are not on this level anyhow. You can see this is some type of podcast, broadcast type of ordeal. When you're doing the devil's work on this type of platform, you're not subject to remote neural monitoring. they're not keeping either of them from speaking. They're not hanging up what they say. They're not switching what they say. They're not interrupting or interfering with what they say. They're allowing them to speak freely. Because I'm not doing their work, they will not allow me to speak freely. It got to a point, like if you watch my older videos, it wasn't such a problem back then. And then the more I started to tell about what they were doing to me, they began to interfere and interrupt what I say. So now it's gotten to a point where I have to script the outlines for my videos. Like I have to write them out and then recite them. And when I say recite them, I mean read them off the paper like a teleprompter. It's gotten that bad because they will not allow me to speak freely.
Because I think it's fascinating because you're actually really defining the parameters as you see it for these multidimensional realities. I'm very interested. So,
Okay, once you get to the seventh dimensional reality, what's happening is multiple timelines. So I'm able to access, relative to this life, I'm able to access multiple timeline potentials. So on the sixth dimensional reality, we're aware of me making a decision right now could have made it so that I was in a completely different location. So one timeline, let's say I already died, but simultaneously, here I am talking to you.
how many different timelines are there? An infinite amount of timelines?
Not on the sixth dimension, there's usually only, it's like 1 to 3.
Okay. And then if we get to the seventh dimension, what's happening there?
That was
That was on the eighth dimension.
eighth dimension, you're connecting multiple timelines to each other. So